Hello friends, my name is Rohit Rani and I have done graduation in BSc Computer Science and I am a student of ML Academy. My project is Access Control. So let's start with Access Control. So what is the definition of Access Control? Access Control means limiting access to information system resources only to authorized users, programs and processes. This is the definition given by National Information Assurance Glossary. Controlling access to resources is a fundamental element of security. Access control is the relationship between subject and object. The subject is always an entity that receives the information from the object. The object is always an entity that produces the information. For example, a pin on an ATM system. Now when you go to an ATM system, you have to enter a PIN number to access your account. That PIN number is a form of access control. Now let's see the access control in computer security. Here, access control includes authentication, authorization and audit. It also includes measures such as physical devices, biometric scans, digital signatures, encryption. Access control provides essential services of identification, authentication, accountability and authorization. Now what is identification and authentication? It means who can log into the system. Identification describes a method of ensuring that the subject is the entity it claims to be. Identification can be provided with the use of username or account number. To be properly authenticated, the subject is usually required to provide a second piece to the credential set. This piece could be a password, paraphrase, PIN or token. If these credentials match the stored information, the subject is authenticated. Now, authorization. Authorization is what the subject can do. It is a process of determining the access right and privileges of the subject. The very important point here is, if a person is properly identified and authenticated, it does not mean that he is an authorized person to access a particular object. This is because the fundamental principle of access control is to deny access by default when access specifically is not granted to the subject. Now let's move on to accountability. Accountability uses audit trails and logs to associate a subject with his action. Audit trails and logs are important for detecting security violations and recreating security incidents. If no one is regularly reviewing your logs that are not properly maintained, they may not be admissible as an evidence. Nowadays, many systems can generate automated reports based on certain predefined criteria or thresholds, known as clipping levels. For example, a clipping level may generate report based on more than 3 failed login attempts or any attempts to use a disabled user account. These reports help system administrator to more easily identify break-in attempts. Let's move on to need for access control. Access control needed to protect CI of information asset. CIA means confidentiality, integrity and availability. It is the foundation of all other controls of information security. Advancement in technology and stiff competition, where every enterprise is trying to provide better services through a use of technology, which leads to many users accessing various resources. Hence, therefore, we need access control. Take for example, banking system. Banking system in earlier days used to work as a closed entity. Now with every person having an online access to his account, he can access the backend of the bank's database anytime and therefore lead to security threat. Hence, we need access control. What are the different access control techniques? The following are the different access control techniques: mandatory access control, discretionary access control, non-discretionary access control, temporal access control. Now, mandatory access control. Mandatory access control is a policy determined by system and not by the owner. It grants security levels to all subjects and objects. Security levels of an object determines how sensitive the information is, and privilege level of subject determines how much power the program or user has. In order to access any object, the security level of a subject should be equivalent or more than that of the object. Let's move on to discretionary access control. Discretionary access control is here the owner of the resource decided who can access that resource. Owner can also change the permission in some systems. The two important aspects in DAC are every object in system must have an owner. Now in DAC, the owner is responsible for granting permissions. Therefore, every object without a owner is left unprotected. The second is access right and permissions. These are the controls that owner can assign to subject for specific resources. Let's move on to non-discretionary access control. Non-discretionary access policies establish controls that cannot be changed by the user. Here, RBAC model is also considered as NDAC. Now, what is the RBAC model? RBAC model here is every user is granted roles, and every user is granted assigned roles to access an object. Benefits of RBAC are principle of least privileges prevent frauds and encompasses DAC and MAC policies. Now, what's the conclusion from this? Access control is any mechanism by which a system grants or revokes access to some data or perform action. Now, access control is the first line of defense for any system. As information is valuable to any organization to meet its business objective and survive in the market, it needs to protect this information. Access control helps in protecting that information. Thank you.